The first two races of the year is over and it has been utter domination by Max Verstappen and Red Bull. But now F1 moves down under to Melbourne for the Australian Grand Prix, which means that once again it is time for my preview and predictions. This is a series where I'll be previewing and then at the end of the video I'll be giving out my early predictions for the Grand Prix. If you enjoyed the video then please hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. Now let's get straight into the video. As usual, I'll be talking about the top 5 teams, which is Aston Martin, Mercedes, McLaren, Ferrari and Red Bull later on, so stick around for that. Yes, F1 is heading back down under, and for the first time this year, it is a normal race weekend, as practice is on a Friday, qualifying is on a Saturday, and the main Grand Prix is taking place on a Sunday. The Albert Park circuit is a different challenge once again for the teams and drivers. Saudi Arabia was a flat out blast of a circuit, and so too in a way is the newer Australian Grand Prix layout. However, the circuit still features plenty of tricky slower speed sections and heavy braking zones, which nicely tests the car's ability to stop. Also, right now as I'm making this video, the weather for the Australian Grand Prix could also test the driver's ability to stop their cars as well, because right now it looks like that we could be set for the first wet running of the season, as Friday, Saturday and Sunday are looking like they could be weather affected. Downforce levels is typically a little bit higher in Australia compared to Jeddah, but it will be interesting to see what the teams can come up with and how they can cope if the weather does turn out to be a little bit wet, as there has been no wet running so far this season due to pre-season testing and the first two races taking place in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. Tyre wear around Albert Park is somehow even lower than it is in Jeddah, and that is because the surface in Australia is even smoother than the surface in Saudi Arabia, and you could see that in action in 2022 as Alex Albon in the Williams did 57 of the 58 laps on one set of hard compound tyres. Because of this ultra low tyre wear, Pirelli will be going a step softer on the tyres than they did in Saudi Arabia. This means that they will be bringing the softest tyres in the range, meaning that the C3 will be the hard tyres, the C4 will be the mediums, and the C5 compound will be the soft tyre. This lack of tyre wear does mean that pit stops are few and far between. However, if you look at last year's race, you would see that there were 53 pit stops, but there is a reason for this. The reason is that almost all of these pit stops occurred during the red flag periods, as there was 3 red flags last year. Should there be no red flags, then I anticipate that this year's Grand Prix will be a very straightforward one stop, with the driver starting on the medium tyres and then swapping to the hard tyres to finish the Grand Prix. A safety car at the right time could change it to a 2-stop, and the chances of a safety car is fairly high here because the circuit has a lot of grass and gravel runoff areas, which tends to increase the chance of a safety car appearing if a driver does make a mistake. Overtaking around Albert Park has improved since the new layout was introduced in 2022. But it is still pretty tricky, and you can see that as last year there was only a total of 29 on-track overtakes. To try and help with overtaking, the circuit features 4 DRS zones, 1 down the pit straight, 1 on the run from turn 2 into turn 3, 1 from turn 8 to turn 9, and the final one on the run from turn 10 to turn 11. For me, the DRS is a little bit overkill at this circuit and actually hurts the racing, because we just get DRS trains and no one can actually overtake once they're stuck in a DRS train, much like what we saw in Saudi Arabia where everyone was stuck behind Kevin Magnussen. Last year's pole position lap time was a 1:17.472, and that was set by Max Verstappen in the Red Bull. During this lap, he reached a top speed of 326 km per hour. And the fastest lap in the Grand Prix was set by his teammate Sergio Perez, also in the Red Bull, and that time was a 1:20.235. With the potential for rain, I would be surprised if both of these lap times are beaten this year. I just want to say that if you are enjoying the video so far, then I would really appreciate it if you hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. Now though, let's get back to the video and let's talk about the top 5 teams, starting with Aston Martin. For Aston Martin, the Australian Grand Prix could be a good race for Fernando Alonso. Similar to Saudi Arabia, the lack of tyre wear means that he should be able to push his car nicely and not suffer with any woes of tyre wear like what we saw back in the first race at Bahrain. However, as per usual, I am worried that Aston Martin are entering this race with one hand tied behind their back because of Lance Stroll. Lance Stroll had a disastrous Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. He hit the wall in practice, then in the Grand Prix he did the exact same thing, but this time he put himself out of action. If Aston Martin are still strong in the slow speed, then I expect that we could see them have a very good qualifying position for Alonso, and in the race it will once again be a test to see if Aston Martin can keep up when it comes to race pace. At the moment, it does seem to still be a little bit tricky for them, and I do think they probably will fall back just a little bit. For Mercedes heading into Australia, they are going to be happy that this circuit features a few more slower speed corners, because in the high speed they are currently lacking when compared to the competition. In Saudi Arabia, it was like a different formula when comparing McLaren to Mercedes in high speed, and you could see the differences as Norris literally pulled away from Hamilton in 3 corners. Because of this, we saw that Mercedes dropped back behind McLaren in the Constructors' Championship. Going into Australia, we should see the Mercedes team bounce back, especially given how strong they were at this circuit last year. For Lewis Hamilton, he has endured a bit of a difficult start to the season, especially compared to teammate George Russell, who in general does look a little bit more comfortable in this year's car. So it will be interesting to see if this can continue, and if George Russell will once again beat Lewis Hamilton when it comes to the races. For McLaren in Saudi Arabia, they had a great race and were able to take 3rd place in the Constructors' Championship, as Lando Norris was able to hold off Lewis Hamilton, and Oscar Piastri finished the race in a very strong 4th place. And going into the Australian Grand Prix, I think we should once again see them have a very close and exciting fight with the Mercedes team, and maybe they can get involved with one of the Ferrari cars. I think this circuit could be interesting for them. They're not as strong in the slower speed corners, but Australia does feature a good mix of slow speed but also high speed corners, which we should see them close the gap when it comes to the high speed. Oscar Piastri is heading to his home race this weekend, and this year it should be much better than it was when he went to his home race last year. If he can nail the weekend, then a top 5 result should be expected. For teammate Lando Norris, he will be looking to bounce back from a somewhat tricky Saudi Arabia. In general, he still has the race pace edge when compared to his teammate Oscar Piastri, but Piastri is definitely improving. For Ferrari, they are still looking mighty strong. In both races, Ferrari has been the team closest to Red Bull, as Charles Leclerc took the podium last time out and Carlos Sainz did in Bahrain. And right now, they are still looking like they have a decent gap to the teams behind, so I should expect that we would see one of them on the podium again. Leclerc last time had a very strong race and was able to set the fastest lap, showing that there is still potential that there could be some sort of fight at the top. He just needs to improve his qualifying performance a little bit more, and we could see them scoring pole position. For his teammate Carlos Sainz, it will be interesting to see if he will be able to take part this weekend after suffering from appendicitis, which took him out of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. If he can compete, then it will be interesting to see if he's back to 100% this weekend. If he is not able to race, then we should see reserve driver Oliver Behrman standing by to drive once again. And after an impressive Saudi Arabia, it will be interesting if he has to race again to see if he can improve and potentially finish in the top 5. That is, of course, if Behrman does need to race. And finally, for Red Bull, it should be another strong and straightforward weekend for them. The car is looking like it is mighty strong, especially in race trim, and with the surface being even smoother in Australia, we should see them have another dominant weekend. Max Verstappen cruised to victory in Saudi Arabia and is already 1 win away from matching his all-time record for consecutive race wins, and if it is dry, then he should easily match that record once again. For his teammate Perez, he will be looking to have an improved weekend when compared to how his Australian Grand Prix went last season. So with that in mind then, what are my early predictions for the Australian Grand Prix? Well, for qualifying, I am going to stick with the obvious, which is Max Verstappen will take pole position. But what about the race? Well, in the midfield, I think the top midfield team and driver will be Nico Hülkenberg in the Haas car, as tyre wear shouldn't be an issue. But what about my top 5? Well, in P5 I'm going to go for Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari, P4 will be Oscar Piastri in the McLaren, P3 will be Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari, P2 will be Sergio Perez, and yes, that means Max Verstappen will equal his record for consecutive race victories by winning the Australian Grand Prix. But that is what I think. The question is though, what do you guys think? In the comment section down below, let me know what your thoughts are. And as always, comment, leave a like, and subscribe for more F1 content. Thank you all so much for watching.